So we know depression, anxiety, mood disorders, these are terms that we use a lot and we hear about a lot in this culture. And we wonder what are some of the evolutions that's maybe happened with these kind of mental challenges from this generation compared to maybe past generations. So we're comparing maybe people in their 20s, 30s versus like their parents' generation, 50s, 60s, 70s. So what do you notice that is maybe call it generation gap or something that has always been existing or kind of have always been, or has it evolved in any ways?
Yeah, if I use the generation between myself and my parents, I would say they have a real resistance to acknowledging depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders. They just call them other things. They talk about having the blues rather than being depressed. They talk about nervous breakdowns, which really is not a clinical term and could mean a lot of different things. So I think what you have is a real resistance to dealing with mental health issues, calling them something else. But what happens is they often manifest themselves physiologically. They come out as different physical symptoms, like GI problems or other aches and pains, which are really symptoms of an underlying mood disorder. There's a real resistance there between the generations. Now, my daughter's generation is, I would say, different, that they're much more open to not only looking at themselves, acknowledging issues, and being willing to seek professional help for them, which is very gratifying to see that continuing. Now, when we lived out here in California, there was much more of an openness on this end of the country, even 35 years ago when we were here, and there was much more available services and people you could see than when we went back east. It was like, it felt like we went back to the dark ages as far as the openness to looking at oneself and describing depression and asking for treatment.
I also think that life was a lot simpler 1 and 2 generations ago, and it has gotten so complicated, and that has increased stress, and that has increased anxiety, depression, somatization, which is what Dan was talking about, where your emotions come out through physical illness, sickness. It has gotten much more intense, overwhelming. People are more overwhelmed.
I think it's important, though, for the younger generations to look at their role in the family's dysfunction, and even if they can't do anything with that generation's issues, they can look at their own and kind of define their role in the family, because we all have roles in our families, and learn how to extract themselves from the family dynamics and therefore live a mentally healthier life themselves.
Their kids, and their kids.
And I'm very hopeful for that too, because I think the services are now available. We get a lot of good literature and resources out there that just didn't exist in my parents' generation.
And even though you have to be careful with online sources, the kids know how to vet those sources. And so they're getting much more sophisticated, intelligent at finding good information themselves and verifying like the source. And so there are advantages to this generation.
I know both of you also touched on this a little bit on the parent-child relationship topic, but a lot of younger generations are inheriting some of the mental challenges or disorders that exist in their families. So what would be a way for a younger person knowing that they're in this kind of stuck almost, where their older parents may not be so open to receiving outside help or counseling, and yet they are stuck. So what would be some of the ways that a younger person can cope?
I think it's actually really important for them to know what their family history is. One of the homework assignments we give couples when we work as marriage mentors is basically a mental health genogram. A genogram is where you just put X's and O's for moms and dads and siblings and aunts and uncles, and then we ask them to track schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, addictions, suicide. It's just important to know what you're dealing with. For instance, schizophrenia usually manifests around the age of 19 to 23. And if you're starting to hear voices around 19, it might be good to know you have a family history of that. You know, it just informs you. So,
And the longer I do this and the more research we have, we've come to understand that genetics are very powerful. So you can run, but you can't hide. So you need to know what your genetic material is being passed on to you. For example, we've discovered that alcoholism is passed along genetically. That doesn't guarantee the next generation will become alcoholic, but the propensity for them or the likelihood of them becoming alcoholics is 2 to 3 times greater than someone who doesn't have any alcoholism in their family. So if I were that person, I would want to know that if I decide to start drinking, that might be the first of many. And then I go down that rabbit hole like my father did, my grandfather did. So then at least I would have a choice to say, I'm going to not drink.
right. Informed choice, yeah.
Right, so I can choose to avoid that because it's highly genetically loaded for that particular one. My guess is a lot of the others are too, and we just haven't uncovered all the
DNA
genetics of
sequencing.
that. Yeah.
Is this something that a person can just find and do self-testing and diagnose, or is this something that they need to see a professional counselor or a psychologist?
They really need their family to tell them what's in their history. I guess you might get some of it if you tried to do your own genealogy type research, but really, it's interesting though because that's where the shame, things that are covered up in shame, like suicide, alcoholism, abuse. Even though it's never talked about, it pops up, keeps popping up generation after generation. It's in talking about it and giving, I would say, empowering the individual to at least give them a fighting chance to not go down that route, that shame is broken. So.
Yeah, that's when you ask questions about that crazy aunt that everybody talks about, but you don't really know what the problem was.
Right.
You kind of lean into that, say, "Come on, tell me what was happening with her. What was going on there," and you can get some ideas that way. Because my parents' generation, you just didn't talk about mental health issues.
Right.
You just put people away, or you just kept them out of society. And I'd want to know that if I'm second generation, what went on in our family. Schizophrenia is very much a genetic disorder. Bipolar is genetically loaded disorder. And all these are pretty serious mental illnesses that you need to know about if they're in your lineage.
Well, maybe on a lighter note, not maybe so light, but then anxiety is another mental illness or challenges that we hear everybody is going through anxiety, especially with recent COVID. What do you think? I mean, with all this current events that's going on, it is easy for anybody to feel anxious.
Absolutely.
You know? What are some of the ways, or like, do you see in your practice also have this expanded on like people wanting more treatment, or in your practice like different trends almost, or different developments happening in that area?
I feel like the trend is intensity and desperation. People are, a lot of people have waited sort of the pandemic out, and now they're coming in and they are so broken. It's just harder to help them put themselves back together, and it's mostly anxiety. It's big social anxiety. Like social anxiety is just really escalating, and like I do see teenagers, and one of the psychiatrists that wrote it's almost like disability, but for the child to be taught at home, said she's doing one a day. And these kids they can't make it to the end of the school year. It's just, they're very depressed and they're very anxious and they're very stressed. So the isolation of the pandemic was very damaging. I thought the uncertainty would be more damaging, but I think for teens, they have their parents to handle that. The isolation was very Very hard on the teenagers and on the school teens, college kids. I mean, they didn't have closure. They didn't get to graduate, some of them. They didn't have proms. They didn't have proper football games. You know, it's been rough, and we're starting to see it. Brokenness.
Right, and I think the mental health bill for the effects of the COVID, we're going to be paying for years.
Yeah.
I think it's just now starting to emerge, particularly academically. And then I would also add that families have been trapped at home with each other. Dad's now working from home, and the stress around the house and the family dynamics just bloom, and there was nowhere to go with it. I mean, I think for 4 months, I did telehealth out of our basement like some kind of troll, which I'll be thankful to never do that again. But it just disrupted all the services that could be there, and the need for them was greater than ever because of the isolation and the togetherness.
Right.
So you have a double whammy there.
Right. Human touch, so important.
Right.
So these are some, are there any other shifts that you've seen in your practice because of COVID?
I feel like what was good got better and what was weak got broken. So a lot of family work, just families in distress. And again, a lot of teenagers, more suicide attempts and suicidal ideation or thoughts. You know, hope. When you had that section on hope, kids are really struggling with hope. I keep saying kids because I'm 60. You know, young adults, we're all struggling with hope. And I think a lot of that has to do with the pandemic. It just sort of deflated people. And
I think the other effect of the pandemic was a strong sense of helplessness. Like, here's this thing we can't even see that has totally wrecked my life. I can't go anywhere. I can't see my friends. I'm in danger of getting them sick or them getting me sick, which fosters some paranoia. And just a real, I can't think of anything that would have messed us up as bad as COVID has. It would have taken something like that to do the damage it's done.
So do you have any helpful tips then to help them to help people manage or regulate healthy mental balance, sanity? What would you recommend?
one is a shift in perspective. I like to use the metaphor of a kaleidoscope. If you just turn that wheel a little bit, you get a completely different picture. That really helped me with the Ukrainian news. I literally felt survivor's guilt watching what was happening to them, and why am I so comfortable and secure and they're dying and their life just got literally blown up overnight. I decided to shift that from survivor's guilt, why them, not me, to almost in honor of them, because I get to live life, and I get to live life, at least now, in a safe way. I'm going to do the best I can with my life, almost like to honor them. I'm not going to waste my life because they've helped me see how precious life is. So things like shifts in perspective, breaking huge things down into smaller steps and working on them so you feel like you're making progress. The work of identifying the boundaries we talked about, what's mine, what do I own, and let me be responsible for that and not get overwhelmed. I mean, take a break from the news, social media, and just go out and take a little walk, get some sun. I go out and sit in my car in the 10 minutes between sessions when it's sunny just to feel this, or I walk around the apartment, the complex. And laughter, humor is huge. Music, good music is huge. Just all those little things you can do. Hug somebody who will let you. Tell someone you love them.
Sure.
You know, just the little things.
Which doesn't cost anything either, all these things.
Right.
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 Yeah, I would add just the intentional re-engagement back into life, which does mean moving away from cyber connections to real-life connections, calling your friends and getting together.
Right.
And taking whatever risk that feel like they're there. And I know some people are wearing masks, some aren't. But I think it's really important that we get back together and be around each other physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah, I have teenagers still hiding behind their mask. The hoodie comes down to here, the mask goes up to here, and I get this. That's what I see. And I can't.
This is a terrible time to be a bank teller.
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah, exactly, right. You
Yeah.
see people masked
It's
up and then
hard.
asking for money on the
Avoidance and hiding.
Right.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
Yeah.
that's awful.
It's
That's
been rough.
right, right. You know, yeah, it's easy for somebody to feel really futile and helpless, given all the world current situation, especially with COVID. So no,
Right.
that's great. These
Right.
tips that it's just doesn't cost us anything to do, but
Right.
to regularly, intentionally do those. So now, when would you say that this person absolutely should see a therapist? Who and when would you say you would absolutely recommend, whether someone...
Right. I think anyone should see a therapist when they've had chronic and persistent symptoms that just haven't gone away. Because we can go through some dips in our mood and then recover, but if you don't recover and you start adding symptoms like irritability, sleep issues, eating, sleeping issues, then it's time to get some professional help, find out what's going on.
We talk a lot about, there are long-term clients who are deeply disturbed, but you can come in for 4 or 5 sessions and work on something specific and be out. So I would say if you're in distress, get help. If you're in over your head, get help.
And how do you know, like I think we did talk about this a little bit before, how do you find the right therapist? I mean, do you Yelp it? Do you just go online? Do you go get second opinions before you commit to multiple sessions? What do you recommend?
Well, we recommend that people interview therapists and just feel a goodness of fit. And I think if they do that and they ask questions, which I don't mind that at all, if someone comes in and say, hey, I'm just interviewing you to see if you're the right person, I think that's great. That's really wise on their part, because I want to be that guy. And if I'm not, they need to go see someone else. So I would suggest they interview 2 or 3 therapists. Sometimes people are forced to stay within their insurance plan, so they just have to pick out of that. There, I would suggest get the person with the most experience and the most credentialing, if you have to choose.
Right.
And then go see how it feels to sit in the room with them. Most people will know which one is the right fit for them just by doing that.
Word of mouth is great too. If a personal recommendation really goes a long way.
Do you also have suggestions for people who have maybe no resource or financial ability to go see a therapist, or what would you recommend?
Well, county mental health is always a good place to start. Just about every county has a mental health department, and they may offer services there, sometimes group therapies, or they'll refer you to someone who has a sliding scale or reduced payments. Some people are on Medicare and Medicaid. There's therapists available for them there. So start at your mental health department. Other places, like for Christians, Celebrate Recovery is a wonderful organization. I happen to be the ministry leader for our Celebrate Recovery at our church for 13 years, and it's just an amazing program, and it's free. People come and they get both the teaching, they get the spiritual emphasis, but they also get the group interaction in a 12-step program. And we're there every Thursday night, rain or shine. So those kinds of resources in the community, if you find those, they don't cost you a thing. And it's not therapy, it's a supportive 12-step program, but for a lot of people, that's really what they need.
I will say my clients who also do their inventories at Celebrate Recovery, they're just growing exponentially faster than my other clients. Celebrate Recovery is broader than Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. It's for people with hurts, habits, and hang-ups, they say. So it can catch, yes, pretty much anybody could go to it and receive the same benefit of a 12-step program. And the other thing is it doesn't hurt to ask for a therapist to reduce their fee. My former supervisor charges $160 an hour, but he charges college students $40 because he has a soft spot for them. So it just never hurts to ask.
And this program, the 12-step program you mentioned, is that national? Is that available nationally?
Yes, started right here in California at Saddleback Church and has spread out through the world. There's an international program. Yeah, I think if someone really wants treatment badly enough and is willing to do the legwork, that it's available.
Yeah.
And it's been more so than maybe 15 years ago. It would have been a little harder, but there's a lot of self-help support type groups that you can become a part of. And I know in the state of Maryland that it is required that if you have insurance, that it must cover psychotherapy. So if you live in Maryland and have insurance, then it will cover those services. I don't know if that's true in any other states. I suspect it is. But I think that's an enlightened thing to do. So there may be resources there you don't know about, but if you want help, it's there.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing us with these practical resources that's available for so many out there. So thank you.
Welcome.